Shabbat Shalom. So I'll admit I was a little scared, but I had to try. I had to test it. I had to see what the future has in store for me. I loaded up the AI bot, and I asked it to write a sermon. This isn't it. As you can tell, I'm not reading from a piece of paper. But I had to see, will it be in another year or two that rabbis will be replaced with a lovely little monitor that someone just types in before Shabbos, please give a sermon about the Torah portion X, hit enter, and then, best speech, text-to-speech translation, you could have a lovely sermon with just a few clicks. Thankfully, the sermon that it spat out was so juvenile and full of cliches and trite aphorisms that I feel that at least for the time being, my job is safe. That's not to say that there aren't people who aren't looking for trite aphorisms, cliches, and rather dull, juvenile-type Judaism. There are many of them that would feel very happy if that was the Judaism they encountered, looking for the bumper stickers, looking for the reductionist versions of their faith, most importantly, looking for something that reduces Judaism to a level where now they realize there's nothing about themselves that needs change or improvement. They're already perfect. That is the kind of sermon some people like. And that is close to the sermon that the AI spat out. So if you want that, if you want that, you're probably not listening to me at this moment. So why bother going into more detail? But there is a question of why couldn't it create a better sermon? Is it just a failure of programming? Will the algorithm become more sophisticated and more advanced? Of course, it probably will. But there is also an underlying conflict in its inability to create a proper Devar Torah, which is that the AI doesn't know who will be hearing it. Well, yes, you can put in for a group of senior citizens, for a group of young parents. You could certainly put in parameters like that, and it would modify it to some degree, but it wouldn't know the individuals that were in the room. It wouldn't be able to look them in the eye and be able to adjust the message depending upon who was there. One of the reasons why this is in my hand rather than being written from or being read from verbatim. There is no flexibility. There is no awareness within the algorithm, at least yet. And maybe someday the philosophers will say we've reached a point where that changes, but I don't think it's coming soon. Because it's hard to teach that even in the regular world of flesh and blood. It's hard to realize that the Torah is meant to be constantly living and breathing, expanding and contracting and interacting with the community around us. Partly, we find that hard to believe because we live awash in the information age. And I don't just mean the recent advances in AI. I mean just the advances from the printing press, and then certainly in the final waves of the information revolution that brought the internet and brought so much material so easily to our fingertips. There is a simple solution when one has a question that seems so obvious that we all use it to the exclusion of alternatives. It's called Rabbi Google. If I have a question, what do? Well, I'll see what Google has to say about that. I am not knocking it. It is a very good idea, but you have to be very aware of what it is that you will encounter. When you type in, give me some good bedtime stories for my kids that are related to the holiday of Hanukkah, well, it's going to take you to PJ Library, more than likely. And PJ Library is an amazing institution, one that Penelope and I are happy to support and that does amazing work throughout the Jewish world by providing books for young Jewish families for their children. But when you read the article on PJ Library, and it's listing their top 10 Hanukkah books, understand that it's not talking to you. It is talking to a cardboard cutout that might resemble you, but it's not talking to you. It doesn't know where you are in your struggles as a parent. It doesn't know where you are within the spectrum of introducing Jewish concepts to your children. It doesn't know how you feel about different attitudes from our tradition and whether you want that to be a predominant view for your child for the holiday of Hanukkah or not. It doesn't tell you whether or not you are struggling with issues of anti-Semitism in your community, of whether the child has brought home many questions because of the challenges they have been bullied with by classmates, it doesn't know you. It can only get kind of, sort of, in your ballpark, which is good and helpful, but recognize it's not talking to you. So too, if you go to a Hasidic website, one of the most popular in the Jewish internet world, recognize it too is not talking to you. Well, yes, it is talking to a non-Orthodox community, because the majority of their actual Orthodox adherents won't touch the internet with a 10-foot pole, but it's still not talking to you where you are in your spiritual journey, in your understanding of Jewish concepts, in your acceptance of the various mystical things that have been added in through the Hasidic movement, which were never part of mainstream Judaism prior. It doesn't know what you know, and it doesn't know what you feel. And lest you think I'm singling out only those that are not part of the conservative movement, you may go to a JTS video on YouTube and find something fascinating, interesting, but that video wasn't made for you. That video was made for people who were, again, in the ballpark like you, but it doesn't speak universally for the conservative movement, even coming from the so-called flagship of JTS. It is speaking with a conservative voice, but not the conservative voice, and certainly not necessarily your conservative Jewish voice. It will be in the area, but it will not be precisely for you. So how do we get an answer, an understanding, an insight that is custom fit for us, that is not off the rack from some discount shop, that is not just attractive because it's convenient and cheap? Study groups. Actually talk to other human beings that know you. Actually talk to other human beings that care about what you are saying, about what the small inflections in your voice, the changes in your body language, and what examples you have brought, what insights you have tried to offer to them, can let them know how best to try and respond to you. But some questions are too personal for study groups. Some questions the study group may not have the information to answer. Does that mean we resort to Rabbi Google or Rabbi AI? Some people don't have to. Go to your rabbi. I know, it's crazy. Why would I go to my rabbi when I can go to Google? Why would I go to my rabbi if I have AI? I can just type it into ChatGPT, and what is the Jewish response on this? And it will tell me. Well, because an actual clergy member, somebody who has studied not only Judaism, but how to transmit Judaism to a community, that person is going to be able to give you your custom-tailored answer. And that is something that is, quite frankly, priceless, and something that unfortunately is being devalued in our modern world, that wants quick, easy, readily accessible answers that I don't have to engage in an interpersonal relationship before I get the answer back. Yes, it's scary to talk to the rabbi. I know, I'm terrifying, and so are all the other rabbis in the world. And yes, I know that there's always this risk that you might ask a question and not like the answer that the rabbi happens to give to you. Yes, you are going to have to risk that. But the alternative is to not really be asking a question at all, but to simply be looking for a validation of something that you already know what you want to hear. And that is not what Judaism asks us for. It asks us to stretch a little bit beyond that. And it asks our community to support us as we go through that stretch. Back in rabbinic school, one of our teachers, coincidentally, as you'll see from the story, who was named Rabbi Shochet, gave us a story when we were studying halakha. Oops, the story will wait until I get the question or comment first. Absolutely. The humanity in the interaction is irreplaceable. And it is that loving interaction that is meant to be at the heart of Jewish life and Jewish growth and the Jewish struggle to answer questions and how they are responded to. Oh, Jocelyn, do you have your hand up too? Mm. So just for those who couldn't hear, are we getting close to what Isaiah was describing in the Haftarah today, where we are bowing down to something that we made with our own hands, that we are worshiping our creation rather than actually turning to God? Yes, this is exactly part of the problem. Not that we shouldn't use our incredible creations that were made with the gifts that God gave us of intelligence and cooperative learning, but we should recognize them for what they are, important tools. To highlight the difference, if I can return to the story, between what you would get from Rabbi Google and what you would get from a flesh and blood rabbi. The story that the Rabbi Shochet told us in our halakha class, our Jewish law class, as we were learning halakha, and some of us perhaps drifting towards being of the opinion that this was a mere algorithmic process. Learn the right section of halakha, enter the circumstances for the question, output what that result must be. What is the law? And he said, you're not understanding. There was a woman who came with her family to a shtetl many, many years ago, back in the old country, back when things were done the old way. And it was the first Shabbos, just a couple days after she had arrived. And her husband was busy with so much, her children were busy with so much, she was really going nuts trying to get everything ready for Shabbos while everyone else was doing their parts as well. Well, one of her parts was to do shechita, to do the slaughtering for the chicken before preparing it for Shabbos. But as she slaughtered it in the way that her mother had taught her and the way that she had learned, she then opened up the chicken to examine it, which is part of how you prepare an animal to make sure that it is kosher. It's not enough that it is slaughtered right. It is not enough that the other acts of killing it are done correct. You also have to make sure that it's not suffering from different illnesses inside, any blemishes, some of which can render an animal treif, even if it was right in every other way, and some of which will be easily ignored, and the animal is still fit, it is still kasher, it is still okay to consume. Well, as she opens up the chicken, she sees a blemish, an imperfection that she's never seen before. She sees a problem that has never come up, and her mother never explained this to her, and so she's not sure. Is the chicken kosher or not? And, the clock is ticking, Shabbos is coming, what is she supposed to do? Well, she runs to the rabbi with chicken in hand. And yes, this is a part of the job that I don't get to do very much nowadays, and it's not so bad that I don't have to look at chicken guts all that often. So she runs chicken in hand. Now, understand, she's in a hurry, which means that she is still wearing her shchita shmata, right? She is still wearing the clothes that she was wearing while butchering the chicken. So she still has the messy apron, and she still got her definitely worse clothes, and, she looks not so great. But, what are you going to do? Take time and get dressed to go visit the rabbi when it's Erev Shabbat and you need to prepare the chicken? No, you go, you get your answer, you get back, you get it on because Shabbos is coming, and once the sun goes down, you're done. So she gets to the rabbi, she knocks frantically on the house, the rabbi opens the door, and he sees the woman, and he had heard that a new family had moved to the community, but he hadn't met the family yet. So he welcomes her in, she lays out the chicken for him, and explains the problem. And the rabbi begins to examine the chicken, and he's beginning to recall the different halakha for blemishes of this type. But while he's examining the chicken, he's also examining her. He's looking her up and down. He's looking at the chicken, he looks at her, looks back at the chicken, and really what he is doing is biding his time. See, he immediately recognized that the particular type of blemish that is in the chicken is one that is controversial. It's Judaism. Guess what? And in the controversy, there are some that say that a blemish of this nature is no problem and a chicken like this is perfectly fine and kosher. There is perhaps a slightly stronger case to be made among those that reject that position, that say, no, this sort of blemish is in fact something that would render an animal treif, and you shouldn't eat a chicken if it has that type of blemish in it. Well, he was already identifying that, but he was looking at her to figure out which answer would he give her. And as he's looking her up and down, he's doing the assessment. This is somebody new to the town. I don't know. Do they like stringent answers? Are they willing to accept the stringent answer? Should I start off more leniently with them? Or is that something that they would not prefer? On the other hand, looking at what she's wearing, she looks quite in need. This could be the only chicken that her family has. And without this chicken, her family may not have any meat for Shabbos. And that would be a shanda. And certainly there is enough leniency within the sources to say that this chicken could be treated as kosher. And as he's going back and forth, she recognizes that he's looking at her as much as he's looking at the chicken. And she realizes, because she lives in the old country, she lives in that time, that he is trying to make a determination not only about the chicken, but about her needs. Being new to the town, she's going to have to give him a little more information. So she casually says, Rabbi, I'm in a little bit of a hurry. I'll need to slaughter some of our other chickens if this one isn't kosher. To which the rabbi says, well, I shouldn't take up any more of your time. I enjoy looking at these interesting cases. But yes, if you have other chickens, then slaughter one of them instead and take this one to the non-Jewish poor. And so she does. And so Shabbos happens, her family is fine. What happened in that story? Did he determine the Jewish law? Did he analyze it with the algorithm? No. He treated her as the object of halakha, not the chicken. The chicken is the vehicle for Torah. The chicken, kashrut, all of our laws are the vehicle for how God has us live in a humane, empathetic world. But they are not the object themselves. The person is the object. Their neshama, their soul, is the object. What would be right for them? Now, he wasn't going to say the chicken was kosher if it obviously wasn't. He would have found another way around it. He would have said, well, I'm sorry, this chicken isn't kosher. However, we have extra chickens at my house. I'd be more than happy to give you a chicken now because you might not be able to find another one before Shabbos. He could have found another solution had it been necessary. And had he known her circumstance, he might have been able to lead off with a much quicker answer. Because that's the ultimate goal, is how will I and how will you allow our souls to grow closer to God through the vehicle of kashrut, Shabbos, the honesty with our business, our treatment of each other in interpersonal relationships, through all of the different details of Torah. How will this help us grow? And that doesn't come from AI. That doesn't come from Google. Yes, we can approximate it. Yes, we can build formulas that are ever more complex to try and approximate what would be the answer of a person in a situation like this who knew all of these different variables to such and such decimal places. But it still wouldn't actually be an answer that came from the heart. It would only be an attempt to predict what the answer that came from the heart might be. This is why we are still a physical community. This is why we have not just all decided to resort to Rabbi Google and do whatever we think is right based upon our own research and search history, but we still come together as part of a community. You still give me a chance to stand up here and say things. You still ask questions, lots of questions, which I love, because that means you recognize that this is what Judaism is meant to trigger within us. We are not machines. We cannot be led by machines. We are led by our souls, and that means we have to allow our souls to come into contact with each other. We will have another chance for that after our Kiddush luncheon, when we have our nutshell, as we continue on the topic of Malchut, of God's kingliness, God's dominion, God's sovereignty, a more complicated idea than you might think, and one which I hope will give us more guidance on how to open our soul in prayer. But for now, Shabbat Shalom. Speaking of guidance, it would certainly be trivial to simply have a recording of the finest cantorial soloists ever to hit play whenever we wanted to have Musaf service. This would be far inferior. Yes, beautiful performances, there are recordings out there aplenty. Hear them, marvel at the skill of so many people that have been part of our tradition. But for actual prayer, you need an actual person. You need a living, breathing soul that is guiding us in our prayer as well. As such, we turn to Judy Chistis for our Musaf service this morning.